It is No Gifts, Please, the parenting podcast by the payer with no real gifts, but a whole lot of gumption. Hey everyone, I'm Steve Noviello.
Hello, I'm Jenny and Chanda.
I've got to ask, are you having sex lately or what?
I guess this is sort of the topic of the day, huh?
Well, because for a minute there, you were trying to get pregnant for so long.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm assuming you were probably having sex often.
It's the least romantic thing.
Right.
Like it's romantic in the beginning, right? Because it's like, oh my gosh, let's have a baby. And then you think it's just going to happen because your whole life you've been prepared that if you have sex, you will get pregnant immediately. And you automatically worry like, am I 15? Is it okay for me to have a baby right now? And they're like, yes, you're 40, you're too late. So then it gets into timed and then you're like, and then it gets really...
You're like, it's Tuesday at 4:37. Let's have a baby.
It gets a little chory.
Is it
Not because it's like nothing to do with Heath. It's just anybody who's been through that gets it.
Okay.
Like you timing.
Well, you know what? Listen, I would imagine for some couples, for many couples, even if you're not going through 6 or 8 years or however long it was of IVF and you're trying to get pregnant, that sex can become chory even through the natural course of being a parent. That's why we have an expert today.
Exactly. Our chory guest here today is Rebecca Howard-Udy. So she is a certified sex therapist and author of this book. And this book really caught my attention. It's called Parents in Love, A Guide to Great Sex After Kids. I don't know if you read this like on the airplane or what, or maybe just like at home. Anyway, she is certified in emotionally focused therapy. She helps couples navigate sex, desire, and connection in the whirlwind of parenting, even when life and kids make it feel impossible. Okay, Rebecca, I have a feeling like a lot of people need this book. Welcome. So glad to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So I think that the question that people probably have is there a point at which, it sounds like kind of desire leaves the equation? And can I get in front of that? Like, are there like small signs at the very beginning where I can say, oh gosh, it's about to happen. Let's get ahead of it. And we don't have to worry about any of this. Or why do we kind of fall out of physical touch with one another?
It's a great question. And I would say that desire doesn't leave the equation for everybody. If desire leaves the equation for everybody, it's typically not that much of an issue. Because everybody's happy, nobody's having sex and it's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
See?
Just like unequal
but
partners.
If one of you and one of you doesn't, then that's when we run into big problems.
That's when the problems happen. Because if both people have a matching desire, whether it's high or low, then it doesn't matter. They're only comparing themselves to each other and everybody's happy.
Everyone's good.
So
it's like
the issue becomes,
it's like everyone wants the same thing for dinner. So how do you create desire equity when it doesn't exist?
Yes. So it's not going to exist because people are different. Hormones fluctuate. Life is busy. So it is much more common. The couple that does not have a desire difference at some point in a long-term relationship, I mean, I've never met them. I think this is just the norm, that there will be a desire difference. And the way that we combat that, the way we get desire equity, is actually to just get really curious about what you want when you want to have sex, what you don't want when you don't want sex, what is pleasurable, what is shutting people down. And so a lot of times what happens when there's a difference in desire, there's also a lot of resentment and there's a lot of negative feelings. Like it causes a lot of pain on both sides, whether you're the higher or the lower desire partner. And so if we can stay out of that trap and get curious about each other's desire, then that can be really, really much more helpful.
And what does that look like, getting curious about each other's desire?
Yeah, it's a good question. I know that's sort of like a funny thing, isn't it? Getting curious about each other's desire.
Like, is it over dinner? Is it a text?
Yeah.
Like, how?
Yeah.
Play that out.
But it's interesting because you would think that at one point in the relationship, probably when your sexual relationship began, you were very curious about each other's desire, right? I mean, you've actually gone through this exercise once before, if you can think that far back, right?
100%. That's exactly it. Is that when in the beginning of a relationship, we were probably really curious about each other's desire, turn ons, turn offs, how it works, what feels good as you're getting to know somebody. And then you get into this long term relationship and there's kids and there's commitment and there's all of these other things that sort of can suppress desire. And we think we know everything about each other. But the reality is that after kids, bodies change. Different things feel good. Different things spark desire. In the past, something that sparked desire may not do that anymore. Now it might be, the foreplay is starting the dishwasher or, coming in and feeling like your partner is really helping and the chores are equal in the household. That is foreplay. And so it may be that the desire and what sparks desire for your partner really has changed over time.
I mean, as much as I hate to say it, oh my gosh, he made the bed and that's not his job. And now I have one less thing to do, gets me going.
Oh, totally. I feel
Yeah.
like I'm in a very masculine energy. If there's, I don't know if that's the right word. I don't have the right terminology, but if there's a bunch of stuff for me to do, I'm very short and cold and cut off and okay, I have to do all this stuff. And if I'm doing that and he's watching football, there's
no desire.
Right? There's just not, because I'm not in any sort of intimacy energy. I'm in production mode. It's like I'm a worker. I'm on an assembly line. Nobody is cute on an assembly line. But if I'm hanging out and relaxing and maybe he made dinner or did the dishes or like Steve said, just a little extra thing that wasn't his normal task, that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a normal pattern? I know that you said that there are some normal patterns that most couples fall into.
Yeah. Everybody wants to be appreciated. So that doing those sorts of things, like those little extra things, that's actually appreciation. It's like getting on the same team and feeling like, wow, we're in this together. And you might not have had to do that, but you did because you care about me. You appreciate everything else that I'm doing. If you're on the assembly line, feeling like someone's there next to you, you're doing this thing and then you hand it to them and they do their chore and you're getting through it fast together. That is much more attractive than feeling like you're really on different pages. And so, I think that is a very normal pattern. And the thing is that a lot of times for particularly the primary parent, whoever that is in the relationship, and by that I mean the one who's doing the most of the caregiving duties or who's carrying a lot of the mental load around that. It's like the person who's scheduling the appointments and who's doing the groceries and that kind of stuff. So the primary parent, a lot of times, will really struggle to take off that assembly line hat. And it isn't sexy. That caretaking hat,
It's
that
not.
Getting stuff done, it's not sexy. You just don't have access to that softer, sexier, playful side when you're in that space. And when you feel like you're there alone, that's when desire really starts to shut down. And what takes over is resentment, and sort of a lack of warmth in the relationship, which really can shut down that desire entirely.
What I'm also hearing here is that there has to be a shift here in which both partners need to be more vulnerable with one another. It's funny that almost becomes more difficult the longer you've been together. I remember early on in my relationship with my husband, it was about sharing and getting to know each other and being vulnerable, and here are my fears and here are my dreams and here are my hopes. And now, 25 years later, I would imagine for a lot of people, it gets more difficult to be vulnerable. And if you want to kind of reignite that physical relationship, it sounds like from what you're saying, you're going to have to do that. How do I do it?
Absolutely. That is completely true. And the thing is that as we get further and further into the relationship, in the early dating stages, there's a lot of hope and there's a lot of wanting to be known and get to know that person. But then deeper into a long-term relationship, we're so invested. It's so deeply meaningful. It's easier to be vulnerable with someone that you don't really care about, or maybe you care about, but you're not so deeply invested. And so to take the chance to be vulnerable with someone that you've been with for 25 years is a huge chance. Because what if they don't receive it well, or what if it doesn't go well? That would be really devastating. So I do think that the vulnerability piece is there. That's absolutely true. And the other piece that's really important about the difference in desire is that each person has their role to play. And so the lower desire person has to get curious about their own desire. So, what are the things that shut them down? And do they really want to be sexual with their partner? Do they want to connect in this way? And if they do, even if they don't want to do it in the moment, but in theory, they'd like to be able to connect this way, then figuring out what's going to unlock that for them, what's going to help them to get into that place. And maybe it's asking for more help around the house. Maybe it's like when they're on the assembly line, they really need their partner to be there with them. Or they may need, there's maybe certain times of day that they really end up feeling shut down, like around bedtime. And so if you want to have sex on a particular night, then they're going to need help with bedtime. Or maybe they need their partner to do it entirely. And so just those little things is taking responsibility for sparking your own desire. And on the flip side, the higher desire partner often ends up feeling like, one of the things that I hear a lot from higher desire partners is that they'll say, I'm not getting my needs met in this relationship. And the thing is that while sex is important, it's not a basic human right. We're not entitled to anybody else's body. And so the higher desire partner really has to figure out how they can control their own desire and figure out how they own their own desire. And a lot of that is combating their entitlement, that they're not entitled to have sex with their partner. And if they push that, and if they think, yes, I am, I really need this from you, they're going to be just another thing on the chore checklist. And it's going to be obligation sex. It's like, no one wants obligation sex. Like, it's like pity ass. That does not feel good to anybody.
So what are the outlets then for the higher desire partner? I mean, because that person might say, okay, well, listen, I'm just more sexual. I'm more charged in this way. There has to be,
maybe they don't work on an assembly line.
But what are the healthy, we know what the unhealthy outlets are, right? And that lead to divorce and whatever else. But what are your suggestions to a higher desire sex partner that says, okay, well, how do I kind of work through those feelings and desires?
Yeah, it's such a good question. Because the thing is that when we want sex with a partner, we want so much more than just a release, right? If we just wanted a release, you would masturbate. And that accomplishes the release often much quicker and much more efficiently than sex with a partner does. But it's so much more than that. It's connection with the partner. It's feeling desired. And so that's where the higher desire partner has to take responsibility, is that maybe there's a part of them that when they don't feel desired by their partner sexually, that can really, really erode away their self-confidence. It can be really challenging. And a lot of times, this is not a hard and fast rule, but a lot of times men struggle with this more because they are not always coached to have the emotional language to ask for needs in other ways. And so figuring out if what you want is connection with your partner. Yes. Would you love it to be sexual? Absolutely. But if what you're looking for is connection, maybe you can find connection on that assembly line. Maybe you can figure out other ways to connect with your partner that are not sexual to begin with, and vice versa. Because the thing is that connection is really what partnered sex is, what's beautiful about it. And so, and pleasure and all of the other things, it has to be good for everybody. But this connection can be found both emotionally and sexually. And so a lot of times people get to this stalemate where they say, well, if we were more emotionally connected, I'd want to have sex more. Or if we had sex more, I'd be more emotionally available. And the reality is that they have to balance. And so a lot of times what that means is that the higher desire partner needs to become more emotionally available, more curious about their partner's desire, more open to hearing what they have to say about what shuts them down, what turns them on. And the lower desire partner needs to figure out how they can access their own desire so that they can figure out how to make their high desire partner feel less alone in the sexual realm, in the same way that they often are feeling very alone in the emotional realm.
So obviously people can go talk to somebody like you, but are there any sort of best practices or things that people could start today if they're saying, hey, I really relate to what she's saying, so that would kind of get you going on the right path?
Yes. So I can think of three things, and I'll go through them pretty quickly in the interest of time. So one, focusing on micro moments. So this happens outside the bedroom. So this is the moments where you look at each other across this crazy, chaotic kitchen or crazy, chaotic life, and you find your partner's eyes and you smile. And it's like this moment of like, oh yeah, there you are. It's like a real hug, like a deep hug where you take a breath together, or a kiss that lasts a little bit longer. So focusing on those micro moments, that's something that everybody can do just today. Stop doing what you're doing. Put down, if you're on the phone, if you're texting, put down your phone. Say hi to your partner when they come into the house or when they're leaving for work. Actually make them feel like you see them. So that's something that's huge for connection. The other thing is that scheduling sex, listen, if it's not on the calendar, it's not going to happen. Like, it just isn't. We all live by our calendars. And that doesn't mean that you need to create like a recurring calendar request and your partner has to show up at a certain time on a certain day. Although certainly that could work for some couples. But it can be a text in the beginning of the day. Hey, maybe I'll see you later. I'm really feeling sexy. How about you? Can we get together? Can we be close tonight? And so figuring out how to get it actually onto the calendar is really important. And a lot of couples are resistant to this because it feels not romantic or sexy. But I would encourage people to think back to when they first started dating. They were already scheduling dates. And so arguably, we might have already been scheduling sex anyway. Bringing that back is not a bad thing. And then finally, expanding what the definition of sex is. Talking about sex can be so sexy. Touching each other, kissing. It does not need to go straight to penetrative sex. And actually, when we get into the routine of sex being certain things, certain activities that we do together, that can start to get stale after a while. And so figuring out how to expand that definition. Maybe you go to first base and that's where you stay for a night. Maybe you decide together how you're going to get a little bit more creative, whatever that means to you. And that can really help a lot as well, is expanding that definition.
One of the things that from what you just mentioned is the pressure, but also the reality of dealing with when you do text your partner and say, hey, in a flirty way, and they say no, that understanding for yourself that doesn't mean no because you're disgusting and you're not a great partner. It just means no right now, or no, I'm not in the mood, or no, I'm busy, or no, I masturbated 5 minutes ago. I mean, who knows, how important is it for people to kind of make sure that they're existing in the proper headspace when they're putting themselves out there like that?
Essential. And I think you're hitting on something that's really important for high desire partners, because they often are the only one who's initiating in the sexual realm. And so the rejection can really wear down. But what you're saying, Steve, is so important, is that very often, almost more often than not, the no is actually not about you at all. It is about the person, right? It's about what's going on with them. Because when we think about it, each of us are our own primary sexual partner. So a lot of times that no could be like, no, I'm really not feeling sexy in my body today. If it's a woman, maybe they're at a particular point in their cycle that they're really just not feeling right. Maybe the stress of a job or whatever it is. So trying to take that less personally and approach those no's with more curiosity. But on the flip side of that, if you're a lower desire partner in your relationship, or even if you're not, it's really important to remember that any initiation, whether it's asking your partner to go for a walk with you, asking them to help you with a task, or initiating sex, it is a very vulnerable place to be in. You're asking for something that you want. And so treating that with like sort of the preciousness that it is, that is a difficult thing to do. And so saying, not tonight, but please ask me again. Or not tonight, but just know this isn't about you. That really being careful with each other when your partner's initiating, because the last thing that we want is for one or both people to get really shut down and then stop doing that.
Right, because then where are you?
Right. The other thing that you mentioned off the top was understanding what your partner is saying yes and no to. Like, for example, I think one of the things that we all deal with naturally as we age, and particularly for women after they have children, are changes in our bodies, and maybe we don't feel sexy in our new shape or whatever else it is. And if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is that, your partner may be saying no to, gosh, I'm not feeling comfortable being seen naked, or I'm not feeling comfortable in my own skin, or I'm not, as comfortable as in this position as I used to be, or gravity is doing things that I don't love that it's doing, totally. Or whatever the case is. Again, that's a really vulnerable place to be. But I think it's so crucial that we understand that with one another, that 9 times out of 10, it's really more because I don't feel like I'm a good, in a good space to offer myself to you, if that makes sense.
That is the way that you said that, I think, is spot on. And I would expand that even to thinking about what sexually are you saying no to? So if when your partner initiates sex, they're talking about intercourse, maybe you don't feel like the person, if you're a person who's being penetrated, maybe you don't feel like being penetrated. Maybe if your partner was initiating being sexual and you could decide together what that meant in a particular night without the pressure of having to do particular things that you may not want to do. So for instance, if somebody were to initiate being sexual as opposed to having sex in the way that you normally do, there's a lot of flexibility in what that means. So somebody might say, yeah, great. I don't know how far I want to go tonight, but I'd love to be close to you. I'd love to snuggle. I'd love to touch. Maybe I'd love to kiss and see what happens. And, getting into the position of actually being sexual is really about, it's 2/3 of the battle because we haven't talked about it yet. But there's spontaneous desire, which is sort of what we think of as being normal desire, right? It's like that lightning bolt. You're walking down the, street and you're like, oh, I would really like to have sex right now. But that's much more common in men because they have more testosterone, higher levels of testosterone. But the other kind of desire is responsive desire. And that is actually meaning that desire shows up after there's already arousal happening. And so it's essential to be able to be in the sexual situation. And a lot of times saying yes to having sex, if somebody is not feeling great in their body, if they're not feeling like being penetrated, if they're not feeling like doing the things that they might be required to do when you have sex in the way that you typically do, if they don't think that they can perform, they don't want to disappoint their partner, they may say no, when the reality is they might actually be very open to being sexual in some way, in discovering how it might feel good to be close in a physical way. And so we shut down all of those other avenues by having a rigid definition of what it means to be sexual.
Yeah. Well, and I think the one thing that everybody is discovering is that, listen, you're probably not alone in this journey, and certainly in this phase of your life. So where can people go to find out more? Where can they find the book? Where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can go to my website, which is just my name, RebeccaUdy.com. And then they can find me on Instagram. My social media is, again, my name, Rebecca Howard Udy.
And spell Udy because a lot of our listeners are going to
Oh, I know. Yeah, it's a tough
audio. There's an E in there, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's EUDY. So excellent. Like Rudy, but with an E.
Perfect.
Rebecca, thank you so much. I certainly learned a lot. I've got some notes and scripts ready. Thank you so much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Good to see you. I hope we get to talk to you again. It's interesting, right? I mean, this is one of these things. I equate it to stuff at school when I was just having this conversation with a mom the other day about some feelings processing that her kid was having difficulty to. And I couldn't wait to share with her that, oh gosh, we just walked through that with our kid. Like, you're not the only one, right?
Yes.
And this, while a little more personal, I mean, surely the moms are discussing this, no?
No, I mean, I think that there's familiarity, right? Everybody's on a spectrum. But it was interesting when she said it. So it was like, we opened up the episode, right? And I was like, oh, scheduling, that was terrible because we don't have to do that anymore. And then she was saying, actually, that might be a great technique for couples that feel super busy and super chaotic, but her scheduling is different. Like, she's talking about sending the text or something, and just communicating. And it's like, it always goes back to communication.
Well, and listen, it's also like, I mean, those 80s movies where the people would have these power jobs and be like, well, 2 weeks from next Thursday, I've got 17 minutes where I can, or is it maybe sending a suggestive text to your husband about something, and then you kind of are scheduling something without it being like, an Outlook invite, which
you
is
just
a
have to
little
make sure,
less
that the
sexy.
suggestive text isn't like synced with the kids' iPads
There
or
you
something.
go.
Just be,
There you go.
mindful of the family tech. But
All
yes,
right.
that was fun.
And be mindful that a new episode drops every Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. on your favorite podcast platform. We want to make sure that you click like and subscribe so we can keep bringing you new episodes. And if you do nothing else today, go find yourself a friend you don't need to clean the house for. We'll see you soon.